Hi, this is Peter Wooding. Welcome to this week's edition of Christian Weekly News. Coming up in the programme, we're going to be looking at people who are engaging in public life, seeking to bring a Christian voice into the public space. We'll be hearing from MP Jeffrey Donaldson. Co-founder of Christian Concern, Omooba, and Andrea Williams are also director of Christian Concern, talking about her recent trip to Australia. Right across the country, people were anxiously awaiting the outcome of the budget in Parliament that was announced by George Osborne. As that was being announced, I had the privilege of interviewing Jeffrey Donaldson, MP, who's engaged in public life for many, many years now. Coming up, we'll get his comments on the budget and also how he's involved in an initiative called Prayer for Parliament. But first he talks about how he was involved in the peace process in Northern Ireland during the Troubles there.
Well, I've been a Member of Parliament now here at Westminster for the last 16 years, and during that time I've also been heavily involved in the peace process in Northern Ireland. But I've been a Christian since 1989, and I feel that being an MP is God's calling to serve Him and of course to serve the people that I represent. But I'm here first and foremost as a Christian. And my first allegiance is to God, to my political party, to the people that I represent. So it is an honour to serve in the UK Parliament and to be part of the Christian fellowship that operates within Westminster. I've been a member of Christians in Parliament since I became an MP. I'm part of a little prayer group that meets regularly here in the House of Parliament to pray not only for ourselves but for our fellow believers in both the House of Commons and the House of Lords, and to pray for those in authority over us as we are commanded by God. There are meetings every week on a Tuesday evening in London, across the square in Methodist Central Hall in the chapel. And then once a month we bring everyone into the Palace of Westminster and we meet together to pray about those issues that we feel are important for our nation and that affect both Parliament and our government. Because we believe that prayer is the answer. If we want to see this nation turned around, then the most important thing we can do is to humble ourselves and pray and seek God's face and turn from the ways of this world. And when we do that, God has promised that He will hear from heaven, He will forgive our sin, and He will heal our land. It's a beautiful verse in the Old Testament, 2 Chronicles 7, verse 14, that I learned about many years ago. And I see that and the relevance of it in the gatherings that we have here to pray for our nation, to pray for our government and Parliament. In Parliament, there are many fronts on which Christians are engaged, and you know, it almost seems that as soon as we've dealt with one thing, we face another challenge. I think there are many issues that Christians need to be praying about. We need to be praying for our brothers and sisters who face persecution, whether it is in other lands where they are in a minority and are being discriminated against, persecuted, or here in the United Kingdom, where many Christians have seen the reality of persecution come into their lives. Pro-life issues, I think, are very important. We are constantly battling against the 1967 Abortion Act and all that it means here in Great Britain, on issues like the abortion of unborn children who have abnormalities. Gender selection is another issue we are pursuing with evidence that expectant mothers, if they find that the gender of their unborn child is not to their liking, there is evidence that abortions are occurring simply for that reason. These are just some of the things on the pro-life side. Euthanasia remains a big issue. And of course, before us in Parliament right now is the same-sex marriage bill, which redefines marriage and makes provision for homosexual couples to be married. And this is something we are very strongly against. And It was amazing to see that over half of the Conservative MPs who voted in the debate on the second reading of this bill voted against their own Prime Minister. Now, it may well be that the bill will pass through the House of Commons, but we've got to pray that somehow in the House of Lords wiser counsels will prevail, and that Parliament will not pass this legislation, which I believe grieves God greatly, because it redefines something that is not a man-made relationship. It's not an institution that was created just by man. It is something that is ordained of God, and if it's redefined, then I think that is something that we as Christians cannot accept.
Jeffrey Donaldson there, MP, and someone who's involved in public life. And we found recently how many people are coming to this country, particularly from Nigeria, in search of a Christian nation, but are surprised by what they found. One of those people is co-founder of Christian Concern, Ade Omooba. Welcome to our offices at Christian Concern. I'm going to be speaking to our co-founder and director, Ade Omooba. Now, Ade, it's great to have you with us today, and we're going to be talking a bit about what are your greatest concerns at Christian Concern for this nation. But first of all, tell us a bit about your journey, where you came from Nigeria to what you thought was a Christian nation, and you were a bit surprised. Just take us back to that.
Well, that was about 25 years ago, and I'm still surprised, by the way, and I'm still very concerned. Born in the Anglican Church, went to a Catholic school for about 6 years, and then ended up an evangelical minister. So I've been around. I've tested different waters, as it were, and came here having heard stories of missionaries in my country, Nigeria, people who set up some of the best schools. You know, I saw social action in action through what they brought, the missionaries brought, and I'm a beneficiary of that. My father was, my grandfather was, and so I was coming here saying, wow, let me go to the country of origin of these missionaries that have their plaques all over the country about the great works they came to do in Nigeria. Most of them who died in Nigeria, you know, because they were convicted and they really wanted to serve. But I got here, I was extremely disappointed, because I found a church that, in my view, wasn't asleep. It felt so dead in terms of its relevance to the society and the community it seeks to serve. And it varied as you went from denomination to denomination, and from, I would say, culture to culture. Around the African churches in the 80s when I came here, most of them were places of worship. People really just come to church to worship, and that was it. Not much of social action. The Caribbeans were here before us. You will see a bit of social action in their midst, you know. You went to the more traditional established churches, whether it was the Baptist, the Methodist, the Anglican, give their credit to them. A lot of them were already, they understood social action, but probably taking it to another level was a challenge. So I felt that I deeply convicted by God that I couldn't be in a church whereby all I did was just functioned within the temple. There had to be the message from within the temple that went out of the temple to have influence on the community that the temple was within. And so I got my work cut out, and I had to first practice what I preached. So the first thing was, with co-pastors, we began to work in the community, among the homeless, in London then in the 80s, and together with the Southern Diocese, I remember we put up a document. We kind of we developed a document called From Sympathy to Solidarity, Church Response to Homelessness in London, because it was bad at the time. And with people like Crisis, Shelter, Salvation Army, there were a whole bunch of us that came together, worked with government to help with the whole policy on Rough Sleepers initiative, which helped create a lot more hostels for single homeless people. So my early step into social action from a pastoral point of view was something that engaged government on policy, because I immediately saw how public policy could also influence what we did as churches within the community. It wasn't just us going into the community and saying we want to show the love of God through practical care. We also had to bear in mind that we have a company, a government that passes legislation, on a regular basis, and some of those legislation could actually, if we don't consult with government, threaten the good work we're doing locally. And so the engagement both at private, voluntary and statutory level was extremely important. It had to be a holistic approach. So there are times whereby, as a pastor, that's my view, in modern Britain, you cannot just be a preacher. You have to have a business heart, you have to have a public policy heart, as well as your caring heart, the heart to tender. You have to understand and be aware and engage to communicate and to serve the people properly. I mean, you know what Jesus said to Peter? He said, "You love me?" 3 times he asked him. And the guy was getting frustrated. Like, "Why are you asking me? I love you." And the Lord kept saying, "Tend my sheep, feed my lambs." Now, tend and feed is powerful. How do you tend and feed people that you don't engage with?
One of the biggest challenges in engaging in public life is addressing how far away people have gone from believing in Jesus Christ as our Saviour. We've got a video now from an organisation called Truth Exchange, whose director is a good friend of Christian Concern, Peter Jones, who spoke at last year's Wilberforce Academy. Here's that video.
The world is changing.
The world is changing, evolving.
Spirituality is evolving too.
We can bring the good things from every religion together.
God is too big to fit into any one religion.
We need to coexist.
We can't get stuck with an old religion.
One religion that thinks it's the only one. It's the only one.
I believe the West is starting to look more and more like the Greco-Roman Empire of the first centuries. In the ancient world, you have all kinds of different pagan religions, from the Eastern religions to the worship of many, many gods. All that is the worship of the earth.
One of the things that sets Truth Exchange apart is that we expose the lie, and we expose the lie using terms of oneism and twoism and concepts of oneism and twoism.
When I read the Apostle Paul, who writes to this Roman culture, he says there are 2 kinds of religions. He says there's the worship of the earth. His words were they worship and serve the creation. Or, and this is the only other possibility, or you worship and serve the Creator who is blessed forever.
Jesus just talked about two. You're either for me or you're against me. You're either on the narrow road or the wide one. Either you love me or you hate me. The old age conflict from Adam and Eve on has been about one or two.
They represent the only two options in terms of religion itself.
In oneism, all is one. There is no transcendent creator. We become God ourselves.
Oneism promises great things. It promises self-actualization, self-realization. Be your own God.
Ultimately, there's no accountability. When you create your worldview and ultimately you become God, then ultimately you can do anything that you choose to do.
This worldview of oneism wants to create a world where no distinctions exist anymore.
We have lost distinction between men and women.
God and creation.
Between the sexes.
Between man and God.
Distinction between animals and humans.
Between good and evil.
Creation from creator.
The family unit as a unit is gone.
Everything becomes one, and the beauty of the transcendent God and the Son that He sent to redeem mankind is lost today in a culture of oneism.
All religions are one.
I am God.
I am God.
We desire autonomy.
We desire autonomy, self-rule.
Everybody wants his own way.
We don't want to listen to truth.
We don't want to listen to the truth or what God says about His world.
There are two paths.
Two paths.
There are two paths.
God's way or man's way?
God's way or man's way?
We either worship the created or the creator.
In twoism, there is a distinction between a creator and his creation.
Worship of the Creator brings a person into a sense of who he or she is, not as divine, but as a being dependent upon a greater power and authority, namely the God who created heaven and earth.
This creator is not only transcendent, that he is outside of his creation, but he is immanent. He is intimately involved with his creation.
God made every individual, loves every individual, has made each individual different from every other individual, and has given them gifts. And this is what the gospel is founded in.
Twoism brings the gospel, which brings us the hope of the restoration of everything God created.
If you grasp the definitions of oneism and twoism, they are exceedingly practical.
Having the ability to understand the world in a oneist perspective and a twoist perspective allows you to see the common denominator in these movements.
Oneism and twoism really are a wonderful grid by which to view everything in the world around you.
Truth Exchange has helped me engage with the culture, with unbelievers as well as with believers.
I've had the opportunity to be able to more clearly articulate those particular convictions that I have in a way that's understandable to someone who might come from a completely different way of viewing the world.
It's such a friendly way of sharing the gospel that actually disarms what some people would just become extremely hostile to you instantly.
You really can understand and approach any issue, any religious practice, anything that enters into your church by asking yourself, does this take into account that twoist aspect of our existence? There is a separate God, and then there is creation.
So when we explain God and who He is through the paradigm of one and two, it becomes a great way to disseminate the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ and at the same time expose the lie of the culture and the lie of oneism today.
The church is in serious trouble.
We have been deceived.
The lie has permeated our sanctuaries,
our pews.
The lie that truth is no longer absolute.
No longer absolute.
We have believed a lie.
The lie.
Truth Exchange wants to speak to the culture, but through the church.
We can help you to explain to people what's going on in the culture so that they have a way of discussing this with their unbelieving neighbors that allows the person to enter into a discussion about it. Are you a oneist or are you a twoist?
Truth Exchange is equipping the church in several ways.
There's tons of resources that we give free on the website. Dr. Jones writes a monthly article commenting on the culture that's going on. We also have books, we have free audio.
We're working on an evangelism tool to be used before the unbeliever.
Truth Exchange also hosts conferences.
We have a very successful think tank every year. We're trying to reach leaders of every kind.
Then we also are working on doing an annual public conference.
What makes this organization tick is really the passion for the glory of the true God.
I haven't found any other ministry that gets to the point quicker than Truth Exchange does.
I really believe this organization has come about not only for this country and for this cultural setting, but because it's a biblical message, it's for the entire world.
We are excited about the future of Truth Exchange, and we're looking forward to many, many more years of service in the kingdom of God.
Our hearts need to awaken to truth. We need to bring the light to our dead world.
Our world needs to wake up.
Wake up.
Awaken to a new perspective.
God's perspective.
We need to exchange 1 for 2.
1 for 2. We need to exchange 1 for 2.
Truth Exchange.
Truth Exchange.
Truth Exchange.
So following the recent budget announcements, we went out on the streets of Westminster to ask people, was God in the budget? Is God involved in public life and in government? We got some interesting responses from people here on the streets of Westminster. So we're standing next to Parliament. I know a lot of prayer happens in Parliament, but do you think God is relevant in government in Parliament today?
Yes, I believe in God, and I'm somebody who trusts God, Jesus.
What do you think in the importance of praying in Parliament?
Well, I pray for all the ministers, for the Queen first, and the ministers and all the deputies in Parliament. God help them to protect us, to do something good for us, and may God help them.
Okay, we've just stopped some people who are here all the way from Mexico. Welcome to London. Now, we're stood next to Parliament. A lot of people pray in Parliament, pray for the leaders. Do you think God is relevant to Parliament, to government today?
Well, I think it's not actually relevant for the government, but for the people it is, because you start to do the way you think makes you a better person. If you pray, even if it exists or not, it makes you being a better person. That's my way to see the things.
How important do you think it is to be praying for the leaders of the country?
Yeah, I think it's important, but it is not only praying who's gonna change. You know, we need also good leaders to change the world and to change everything.
So, do you think God is relevant in Parliament where we're stood next to today?
Not so much anymore. Back when we were forming society, religion was definitely important, but as the latest census showed, where attendance is dropping in churches, religion is becoming less relevant to people in daily society, it shouldn't be as relevant in lawmaking anymore.
What do you think of the fact that there are some MPs in Parliament that do pray for the issues of Parliament? Do you think that's important?
Again, it shouldn't be. Religious issues and social issues shouldn't really intertwine. People's personal religions or anything shouldn't come into how they act in Parliament. It should be about what's necessary for the people rather than towards their religious beliefs.
Is God and prayer relevant in your own life?
Not at all. I was raised Christian. I went to a C of E school, but as my life's gone on, I've realised that I don't necessarily need that for my own use.
So what are your thoughts on whether God is relevant in Parliament and the government today?
As an observer, I'd say I never saw much sign of that in Parliament. I think there's a general reluctance in Britain, and particularly within government, to even mention religion. It's regarded as a hot topic. You're not going to please many people and you'll probably offend quite a few. But when I was in the Foreign Office, where I was for many years, I argued quite successfully in the end, against a lot of opposition, that when we had a Muslim visitor visiting us officially as a guest of the Queen, as head of state, since the Queen is the head of our church as well as of the government, then there ought to be an element of religion in it. So I dealt a lot with Muslims and I found them entirely relaxed about discussing religion, such a woven into their way of life and into their government as well.
What do you think of the importance that MPs and others actually pray in Parliament for the decisions they have to make?
I like to think that a lot of them did, but I'm not sure whether they do. I know they have certain ceremonies. They have weddings in the St. Stephen's Chapel, and that's a very good thing. But I think it's this wariness about religion, which I think is wrong. I think we ought to talk about religion far more, be far more open about it. Not simply one's own personal views, I'm not talking about that, but of certain Christian principles which are the backbone of our culture.
And just finally, what were your general thoughts on the budget that's been announced?
I have great sympathy for Mr. Osborne. I think he's got an absolutely impossible job, and I think it's unfortunate he had to give away a few freebies. I find a penny on a pint of beer is really a rather trivial gesture. I think we are going through an extremely difficult patch and we have to pull our belts in and grin and bear it. There's no other option, otherwise we'll go down the tube like Cyprus or some of the other countries are at the moment.
And that ends this week's edition of Christian Weekly News. Thanks for joining us on the programme. Again, we'd love to get your comments, particularly on what you think about God being involved in public life. Is God relevant to government today? You can drop us an email at info@christianconcern.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.